much for joining us. And I am delighted to finally be in the company of the brilliant Lillian Rachel voiceover. And I just want to thank you. I know we've waited a long time to have this actual, I would say face-to-face, Skype to Skype, whatever you want to call it, because you've taken up the mantle of recording the sound of your soul, which is a project so close to my heart. And it was just such an honour and a pleasure to share it with you so that you could voice Cally. And you've done it so spectacularly. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was such a joy to just narrate this book. I think it's one of those projects that from the very beginning, just reading that excerpt you put up for the audition. And first of all, it's in first person, which is just a delight to really inhabit the character of someone when it was in first person. And I just felt like there was that kind of connection there with Cally, which you don't always get. I mean, you always act and take on the characters of the people that you're narrating, but there was that intrinsic connection with Cally and the way she feels things so deeply, but never gives up that hope either throughout the whole book. It was, such a joy.
Yeah, and you know what? I could really feel that from the moment that my publisher sent me the excerpt that you recorded. And you could understand from my point of view, I'm quite precious about this character that I've spent so much time with, and I feel like I know her really well. But I listened to the opening segment that you recorded, and I was like, she understands Cally, she gets Cally. There was something in the timbre of your voice and the pace of it that I knew that already you had to be the person to record the book for me. It was sort of a done deal from the first
Love that.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that. It's great when things just connect, in that serendipity, that, I don't know, kismet, and it's just, beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
It is, isn't it? And I felt that rush of excitement, and I think that's how you know that something's right, isn't it? You feel excited. Yeah. I can't wait for this to be birthed in a different way. And it's really nice actually to lift the words off the page, because actually you'll know from recording it, but a lot of the book is about the audio experience. It's about the power of words, and it's about the power of voicing words out loud.
Right.
So I think extra special that actually the book gets to be an audio book, because I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that Cally reads her own words. She is the author of this book. I mean, I wrote it, but it really is. It's her project, and it's her explaining what happens. So it's lovely to see it come to light. And I have to say as well, while I've got you here, I loved your characterization of all the bit parts as well. So obviously,
so many great characters come in and out of the story. Yeah,
so many great accents, and you really capture them. And I think the only one that took me by surprise in a really great way was the character of Esme, because I only told you that she was a northerner, and then you put this like Geordie lilt on her, and she just comes to life so much.
Well, I lived in Durham for 3 years and spent time in Newcastle, and so that was just like, I'm just gonna go for it there. Yeah. And I do love that. Again, you were saying about how the book translates to audio. I mean, some books don't translate to audio as well as others. When the author's writing them, they don't necessarily think about how those words would sound read out loud. And I think because, as you said, Cally is reading these words out loud during, she wrote the story to be read out loud.
Yes.
I think that it's very special. Like you were saying about, the sound of your voice is one of the keys to the book. So
that's why it's called The Sound of Your Soul. So there's not too much of a spoiler to give that away. And it's extra special, I think, because the book's about a lot of things. I mean, you can take the theme of climate change, which comes in here. It's set in a not too distant future where there's hardly any water. There's a war on water. We don't have any fish because we have polluted them out of existence. And that is scarily close to being all too believable right now, isn't it? And there's flash floods. There's all the problems that we are imagining have actually come to fruition in the book. There's even rationing on meat and all of that kind of thing. The book's about the ancient Egyptians. It's about spirituality. It's about what the Egyptians believed. And I've sort of put my own imaginative twist on that one as well, because I think it's just a wonderful area of history. But actually, at the heart of the book for me, if you were to say, okay, Anna, pick one thing, what is it about? It's about relationships. And it's about the relationship between Cally and Simon, and how that develops, and how they have their roller coaster ride, they have their ups and their downs, and I won't give it away, but how that actually eventually transpires for them. And so it was really key actually that I could get someone to put the emotion into the book, to be Cally, to talk about her relationship with Simon, because I think that, as I say, that's so central to really what the book's all about, and how every relationship is hard, and how every relationship is a dance between two people where you got to figure it out because you change and they change and the world changes around you, and it's messy, basically.
With the relationship between Simon and Cally, as you were saying, I think that is key. But you started off with a mystery in the book with Simon going missing. And so what came first with you? Was it like the mystery? Was it like the sound of your soul? I mean, how did you weave all these things together? That always fascinates me with such an intricately woven story.
That's a really good question. And I can think back to 2012 when I started writing this book. And I guess I've always written, and I've always enjoyed writing, and I've done short stories and I've done poems, and it's a bit like training for a marathon, isn't it? You know, you start off doing your 5Ks and you build it up to 10 and so on and so forth. And I've always known since I was 6 years old, I wanted to write a book. It's one of those things that I just knew I had to do at some point in my life. But I hadn't kind of taken that leap. I hadn't found an idea that I thought, you know, had the legs to keep going for an entire novel. And it was really interesting because as I was scribbling away, as I tend to do, Cally came to me. So she came first, and it was her voice that came through. And I was like, gosh, you're miserable, aren't you? What's the matter with you? You know, really down on life. This kind of, but I liked it. I liked the moroseness. I liked how kind of morbid she was. I'm always being told I'm far too cheerful. So she was like the underside of me. You know, she was like, as she says, you know, she was the moon and Simon, her other half, is the sun. So I kind of got this really nice kind of projection of who she was. And I just had to keep writing her to find out why she was sad. And it was like she told me, she was like, I'm alone because my husband has left me and I don't know where he is. Yeah. It was lovely. You know, it was just like, oh, right, that's the problem. Where is he? And at that stage, I had no idea. So I know some authors kind of sit down and they say, right, this is what's going to happen in my book. I'm going to go to A, to B, to C, to D. I felt like it kind of came through her voice, which was why it was so lovely writing in her voice. It was like, all right, Cally, you tell me. And she was completely in control. And here's the lovely thing, because people always say, write about what you know. And that kind of makes sense. And I thought, okay, so I'm a journalist and I work in newsrooms, so I know about that. So I'm going to put Cally in a newsroom, and that's going to be really authentic, and she's going to, you know, get along there. And it was so funny because she just kicked back against that idea.
She was like, nope.
She's like, look, I am sensitive. There is no way I would cope in a newsroom. And I think news is rubbish anyway. And I hate newspapers. They lie and they're not truthful. And I'm an artist. And I was like, yeah, you are an artist, aren't you? And
okay.
And that was lovely because actually then I realised that she was painting all the things that she was thinking. And that was a really nice way for her to try and cope, I suppose, with the world around her, being a sensitive soul. And trying to notice all the changes, and it made her different. It made her distinct to everybody else who was perhaps towing the party government line about everything they would be told about the changes in the world, and she was the one sitting and observing on the sideline. She's very much an observer and a portrayer of life, and that's why she finds it so hard in the book, where she actually has to take action. She actually feels like she's forced to do something because her husband has gone missing. She's quite a reticent heroine. You know, in that sense, she would much rather, and she says it herself in the book, she'd much rather be wallowing in a bath of water, like contemplating the mysteries of life, than there.
I can kind of relate to that.
Yeah. You know, she ends up in Africa, and she ends up, you know, running away from problems. She ends up coming back to London and discovering a whole kind of underworld there. So it's a lot for her to take on, but it's interesting sort of charting that journey because she does it for love. And I think if she didn't love Simon, she wouldn't do it. She simply wouldn't do it. That love is at the heart of the book.
There has to be that motivation, because everything that she goes through and the hope that she maintains, I mean, she loses Simon in more ways than one. Yes. So being able to maintain that hope, like not only will she get Simon back, but she's going to get Simon back completely. I think, you know, she just maintains that hope, and I love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to A, being lonely in life, and B, shifting. People shift away from you in many different ways, and you kind of need to get them back. And I like the fact that she becomes quite empowered in the book. And again, she doesn't really want to learn all this stuff, but she kind of has to learn that actually she's got to start with her. So if she's going to fix her relationship, She just needs to be stable in herself, first of all. She can't any longer rely on somebody else to put her back together. And that's what she relied on Simon for. It was like, okay, as I say, you know, I'm the moon, you're the sun. You make me laugh when I'm in a bad mood. You pull me out of any doldrums that I go through. That is your job. And that is taken away from her. And then what she got, she feels really incomplete. She's like, I'm not the kind of person that does stuff on my own. You know, I'm not that independent girl. But actually, because she's forced to do that, she realizes that actually her priority, if you like, her biggest relationship, her journey through life is with herself. And then it's the relationships around her. So she becomes quite strong, I think, at the end of the book.
Yeah. She, one of those reluctant heroes. Yeah. She never imagined that she would have to do all that in order. All she wanted was just to get Simon back, and she ends up so much more. So that was kind of exciting. But it wasn't just her. It's not like she did it alone on her own strength, but she had this group of people that kind of helped her on her journey. And I like the way that the interactions with the other people who started to see things differently as well.
Exactly. And I feel like it's a bit of a spiritual journey for all of them. And I think I'm very interested in spirituality. And one thing I do have in common with the main character, Cally, is that she had a Catholic upbringing. So I could kind of bring that into the book. It's interesting because it's like she starts with that, and that sort of expands and expands throughout the book, where she realizes that there are universal truths. And it's not necessarily about religion, because God is banned in the book. And that's really interesting, because God is banned as you kind of open the pages. But what that does is that forces religion underground. It's like, you know, at the moment, we apathy towards faith for a lot of people, because it's there, you can walk into any church. But the opposite happens when you take it away. You take that freedom away, and suddenly people are like, well, hey, maybe I wanted to find out about God. So I wanted to kind of explore this idea about spirituality, and as I say, take it right back to the ancient Egyptians. So take it right back to, I guess, what we're all kind of fascinated with. I mean, I know you're on the other side of the pond, but I used to live near to the British Museum in London.
Yes, I've spent lots of time there.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah. And that was a massive inspiration for me, because I could walk in, it's free. And my favourite section, and I know I share this with a lot of people, was the Egyptian section. And you can see the mummies there, and you can go and see the big tombs, and you can see on the lids they've written, this is the path to the underworld, and this is how you get to the other side. And I just thought, do you know what, this is so different to anything I've been taught. I wanted to know more about it. And the more I found out about it, the more interesting it became to me. And this idea of soul, as the title would suggest, is paramount in the book. The kind of questions that I guess I was asking myself, like, well, do we have a soul? What is soul? If we have a soul, where is it? Do we keep it in our body? Does it float outside? Is it a metaphor? Is it a concept? And it's really interesting, I think, that every civilization and every tribe and everywhere around the world, everywhere you go, there's some kind of inkling hinting at the same sort of thing. Whether it's ghosts or spirits or ancestors or God, whatever it is. It's like the human mind has this proclivity to search, to ask those questions. And they're some of the questions that I ask in the book, you know, as part of the journey, as part of the figuring things out, which is kind of coming back to some of the key questions, like what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be human? Now, I'm not suggesting I've got the answers. And I think, you know, some people read the book and go, wow, that's a real flight of fancy. But I think they're the kind of things that actually everybody at some intrinsic level wants to know. Part of the mystery is not knowing, of course. That's part
right. And I think it's good, the number of questions that the book raises. In fact, as I was going through it, it made me bring up a lot of questions. I wasn't raised Catholic, but I'm Christian. And it reminded me of C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters. He talks a lot about soul in there. And I saw a play of it once. And Screwtape, who's this head devil, and he's writing letters to his nephew. And he's talking about the humans and their concept of soul. And he says most people don't think about it, or if they do, they think it's some kind of like fluffy slipper right around here or something like that. And that made me think, when I first heard that, and I've thought about it ever since, I'm like, well, you know, is soul? What is soul? Soul leaves your body. So is it like a physical thing? Like, is it actually physical? No, it's just spiritual. And I'm like, okay, is there a difference between spirit and soul? And, you know, all of these questions just swim around as you're going through the book, and just really start exploring on a more deeper spiritual level almost. And so although I find the book is more of a mystery than just a wild flight of fancy, to tell you the truth, although it is a wild flight of fancy, but a lot of the things are rooted in possibilities, which is what makes it so intriguing.
And actually, that was part of the joy of it, because, as I said, I started with the ancient Egyptians, and I realized that they had this, well, it was a very different conception of soul to what we have today. I mean, we talk about soul, as you mentioned, but their whole idea of a person was really, really different. The person was made up of 9 different parts, and that even the shadow name, they were all part of you, and they all had their different journeys to take after death and all of that. And I thought, okay, I wrote it, and I had this kind of imagination about what the soul would be, what it would look like, its role within the book, how that kind of affected what the government were doing, and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, do you know what, I think this is balmy. I don't think anyone's going to go with it. And then I googled it, and I was like, but hang on, there were people in West Africa who actually used to believe exactly this, and then hang on, there were people in this part of the world that believed a very similar thing. And the more research I did, I thought, well, I made this up, but actually it's believable because it's part of our history as the human race.
Exactly. So you just went there, you did politics, you did religion, you did news, you did arts, you threw it all in there. Yeah.
And what was the process like for you recording the book? Because obviously, you know, when you write it, you've got so much time and you can just sit down and hammer it out. But I suppose the recording process is quite different, and I think it's a lengthier process than many people would appreciate.
Well, I read the book in its entirety before I even start recording, making notes of all the different characters, the different character voices, because you've got to have each character clear in your head when you start to narrate them. Otherwise, it's not believable, is it? And even though, like you were saying, even the minor characters, you know, they're real people and they deserve, you know, to be fleshed out as well. So it's just kind of, and I'm a visual person, which is, I don't know if that's unusual for someone in the audio industry, but I think visually. So even while I'm reading, I see it all in my head.
Pictures,
Yeah, so I'm very visual, and so every character was very clear to me. Thankfully, to your great writing, that really helps as well. So that's the process to begin with, you know, just checking. You had some interesting Swahili as well, and so so that was interesting. So I actually I have a friend who lives in Kenya and speaks Swahili, so I was able to Skype with her, and we discussed some of the different pronunciation options and things like that. So I went through all that, and just, you know, we checked pronunciations like Cooper, the poet William Cooper, which is spelt Cowper, but it's pronounced Cooper. And I'd remembered that from way back, who knows when. I'm like, that's Cooper. I know that's Cooper, but I think in a situation like this, it does behove you to double check, and I like to double check pronunciations of things. I actually contacted the Cooper Museum. Is a Cooper Museum in England, so contacted them, and they're like, yes, it's definitely Cooper. I'm like, okay, good.
These are the kind of things you don't think about when you're writing the book. And I did have some difficult pronunciations in there, and I never really thought about whether it was Cowper or Cooper, although I did go to the church where he's buried in Norfolk, and I did kind of go and see that kind of stuff. I didn't even know there was a museum, so it's nice what you end up making, isn't it?
Yeah, so I know that you do a whole bunch of research while you're writing and before you're writing, but and you get to travel a lot too, so I'm sure you draw on those. But even as a narrator, I think we can get pretty nerdy in our research and kind of delve in and like Cooper. Well, I haven't read him in a long time, so go down this little paragraph, or this, and reading about Cooper and different hymns, because I remember singing his hymns growing up in church, so it was like, wow, flights of fancy there. But yeah, so that's before you even start recording. I've done this research just prepping the book. And like I said, I already had Cally's voice very clear in my mind from the audition. So as you go through, there's a narrating as you go through, and then you send it to a proofer, and they have to make sure that the words that I say match the words that you wrote. and then have it edited and mastered, and it is a process. And then I probably read or listened to the book 5 or 6 times by the time it, is finally
Wow.
done.
Spent
So
about almost as much time as me. Probably.
probably. But this was one of those books that, sometimes when you're reading a book, sometimes you have kind of that feeling of loss when you're finished and you're like, oh, I'm done. What do I do now? And this was kind of one of those books where it's hard for me to move on and get in, because usually I'm prepping one book while I'm recording a book. I'm prepping the next book.
The next one, yeah.
But this one I just got so just like enveloped in. It was really hard to like put that aside and like, okay, I really need to focus on the next book now.
Yeah, it's because that's what it was like for me writing it. I felt like it was just such a magical experience. It was like one thing, the next thing, next thing, and all these kind of serendipities happened while I was writing it, and I'd be out and I'd notice something which would lead to something, and I'd find out that maybe what I'd made up was true, or like there were nice links in the book between things that I'd written, like things that happened, for example, in Ely, and then finding out that William Cooper had connections to Ely as well. So it was all of this kind of stuff going on. But you mentioned at the start there about the different accents and the bit parts. And I have to tell you that when I listened to your audition, because this is at the beginning of the book, and I was really enjoying like the way you really infused Cally's voice with all the emotion that I imagined when I wrote it. And then it came to the part where she gets on the train and there's a couple of people, and I had a grin all over my face. All they do is have a very tiny conversation, don't they? And they actually get off their train. So I mean,
you never see them again.
No, I mean they are actors, really, aren't they? But they were there for me. They existed in the same way that they did in my mind when I wrote the book.
Every person's important in the book, so they all deserve to have their own character.
Absolutely. And it was really important as well, like getting that sort of the two main characters. You think about Cally and you think about Simon. I think we've talked a lot about Cally, but I think you really understood Simon as well, and the fact that he's a very different character. He's very distinct to Cally. They mesh, they work well as a team sometimes, but you brought a maleness to him, if you see what I mean, which I think can be quite hard to do sometimes. You brought that sort of the edge, if you like, that he's got. He's not very serious as a character, but he does go through things in the book that change him, that make him a different person, if you like. And I think you sort of seem to understand his journey as well.
Yeah, that was interesting because with Simon, I get to narrate him as he was at the beginning of their relationship through Cally's remembering their meeting and before they were married and everything, and their beginning of the relationship, and then also his whole attitude and voice changes slightly after he undergoes changes, when he comes in at the end of the book, or as the journeys intermesh. But and so that was interesting to make sure that he comes across as the same character, but you can tell that he's changed.
Yes, exactly. And then that's key to the book, actually, isn't it? It's about people and how they change and how they can change. And without giving too much away, what is it inside of you that causes these changes to happen? There's a kind of sinister undercurrent in that sense that you say. I kind of interweave the government and conspiracy and scandal in there. And I guess that probably very much was because I was working in a newsroom at the time. So, I'm poring all over newspapers, looking at what the government are doing, and I'm seeing all the cynicism, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what happened if you couldn't trust the government? What would happen if they were messing with us more than we thought they were messing with us? So it's kind of this kind of big question mark. It's also a kind of quite common anxiety for a lot of people, because you vote these people in, but can you trust them? Are they just,
who are they really? What is their agenda?
Exactly. And it was quite fun for me, talking about location. It was quite fun for me kind of writing in the British Museum, but also writing in other places around London that I know very well. So from walking around St Paul's Cathedral, which is a water park, actually, at the beginning of the book. It's changed.
St Paul's,
St Paul's, and there's some lovely churches around there, which I kind of brought in around Farringdon and that kind of thing. And as you mentioned, my travels. So I actually spent my gap year living in Tanzania. I was teaching on Mount Kilimanjaro, and it was really, but I was incredible. And when I was there, I think I couldn't really compute the beauty of the place. I'd never really traveled much before, beyond Europe, and it was just like, how can somewhere be so beautiful? So it was really nice to actually transcribe some of the things that I was seeing, you know, the big flowers, the banana trees, you know, the red earth, the ochre soil, the marketplaces and all of that. So I really enjoyed kind of visiting that again in my mind as I was writing it.
Yeah, and I think you can tell that because it seems the details that you put in with the dust and just the sights and sounds and smells of the place were amazing. I've only ever been to North Africa, I've been to Morocco, I've never been anywhere, you know, further than that. But yeah, it's great to travel vicariously too.
Yes, exactly. And I think it was quite important that the book became international at some point, because actually, as we this is about themes that cross continents, cross worlds, cross civilizations, cross society.
Exactly.
So I think it was important that she went to speak to somebody who wasn't of her society. So she goes to talk to a shaman out there, which was really fun actually for me to kind of invent this shaman guy as well in his flight.
Yeah, that was fun.
And you know, to find out some sort of universal truths. And actually, it's at that point that she realizes, I can't run away anymore.
Yeah,
I've got to go and face his head on.
Yeah, it makes a difference that the points that really affect Cally are universal, because you know, when something's a truth, it's a truth, and it's a truth everywhere. And I think that's what makes it more believable that she changed her mind and she went back, because she realizes the grand scale of what's going on and how it does affect more than just her and Simon and their relationship.
Yeah, I think if it had been about her and Simon, given their history and given, you know, how he changed, she may have decided to become an artist in Africa. She may have decided to sell her paintings.
You see the temptation. Yeah,
stay out there with her brother forever and Carmel, his lovely wife, and just, you know, escape the whole problem. But I think, yeah, she sort of realized that actually, because she cares, you know, she's someone who cares very deeply. As I said, she's a sensitive soul, and she couldn't not, in that sense, once she'd realized what was going on. She had to actually follow her heart, even though her head was saying, this is not the easy path, this is not the path that I want to take. I would rather just sit very quietly. I don't like noise, I just want to be
I just want to paint.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think it's part of me as well. I you know, I work in the media and I love the buzz and the excitement, but there's definitely a part of me that sometimes just wants to sit down and write a story.
So do you have any more stories coming, do you think?
Yes, I am. I finished the first draft of my next book, actually.
Lovely.
So it's not a sequel, even though part of me is curious, you know, as to what happens with Cally and Simon, and that is bubbling away. You never know; they may make a return. But I think I needed to go somewhere else in my mind. So I've set my next book in Spain, which was lovely. One of my best friends got married out there, so we took a road trip and we travelled around the south of Spain, and that obviously is so evocative, and like the dry and arid landscapes and the white houses on the hillside. And I thought, I'd like to set a book here. That will be really fun. So we have another strong female character coming through, but I've decided, I think this is a challenge for myself. I haven't written the next book in the first person. I thought it would be nice to do it more generally and write outside and write about it, because it's a challenge. I mean, I couldn't not have written The Sound of Your Soul as Cally, because as I say, she's the reason for the book. Her voice came through, and I wrote it with her at the center. But obviously it limits you as to where she can be and what she can know at one time, if you see what I mean. You can't.
Yeah, absolutely.
While Cally's here, this is going on, but she doesn't know about it because she needs to find out things and see things. So, you know, there are certain limitations there. So I'm trying out a new way of doing it. And actually, when I started it, I thought, well, maybe I should write something more mainstream. Maybe it should be a little bit less weird. Maybe it should be a little bit more kind of. And of course, as I began to write, it's got weirder and weirder. And yeah, you'll see when you read it.
Well, that's where the mystery comes in, though, isn't it? I love things that challenge you to think about things a little differently. Like, you know, especially with like the climate change, it's like, well, what would happen if when climate change gets this bad? We start losing land, you know, the sea is encroaching, the fish disappear. What would that actually be like?
And actually, it's been really weird for me, actually, working in news, as I say. So I wrote this, a few years ago, and these were all kind of speculations in my mind. These were things that hopefully would never, ever transpire. And actually, since I've written the book, I've seen headlines proclaiming the things that happen in the book. I've seen headlines saying, there is a danger of London being flooded if we don't do anything. And at the time I thought, oh, am I going to have to write this out? Is this too unbelievable that London would be flooded, you know, given the fact. But no, that's been in the papers. I mean, people are talking about banning beef and that, you know, the problems with the cows. And obviously that's rationed in the book, much to the chagrin of Simon, who hates it. Although Cally's quite fine because she's like, I like gruel. I'll just eat gruel. That's fine. So all of the things I was speculating about, I have actually seen headlines about this could be real. And I think, I don't know about you, but personally, I like to be optimistic, and I'm very much like, no, the planet will rebalance, and that's kind of the message of the book, actually. But recently, I've actually been a little bit more. This is so serious. This is so scary, actually. You know, when you hear David Attenborough talk, and you look at the science behind it all. So I think hopefully this book is out there as well as a reminder that we can't rest on our laurels with all of this. It's really, really important for the future of the human race. It's that simple.
Right. Yeah. So the book touches on so many things. I think that's one of the things that makes it stay with you afterwards. It's not just a love story. Not that there's anything wrong with love stories, because I mean, that's what makes the world go round, right?
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It has all these other aspects to it.
And I just loved sharing it with you, actually. I think that's been a real joy for me. I mean, I'm so grateful. I can hardly believe it's published, for the first thing. And now I'm kind of turning somersaults all over again because we have our audiobook. And I've always felt like The Sound of Your Soul was something I wanted to share. You know, it wasn't really mine. Cally kind of came through me, but it was kind of like something that I wanted her to be out there. Even though, you know, in the years of unpublished, I was thinking, okay, I'm grateful that I wrote it. You know, it's been a great journey for me. But yeah, it's wonderful to kind of pass it over to somebody else who believes in it. And I guess, you know, when I wrote it, I was like, this is such a flight of fancy. You know, no one's going to go with this. And when I got your mail saying, yeah, now I get this, it was like, this is fantastic. And to sort of send it across the pond to where you are and know that it was kind of growing different legs, you know, and taking on a whole new life form.
It's fun to see, isn't it? Yeah, it's fun to see. And I'm just so glad that it's out there now, and it can grow the audience through audio, which, like I said, is a perfect medium for this book, especially.
I think it was born for it, don't you? And I think, you know, it had to be you. It had to be your voice. You've just, as I say, you've got the right timbre to really kind of get the tone of the book. And I think it is a book with a certain tonality to it.
Yes.
A flavour, if you like. It's a distinct flavour. And I think you really lift those words off the page and you bring them to life in the same way that Cally would paint a painting.
That's lovely. Thank you. It was, like I said, it really was a pleasure to narrate this. It was just such a joy to just, I don't know, really enmesh myself in this book. It was, it just seemed to flow. Yeah.
With only one sticking point, right? The name of those bridges.
Which I could not find anywhere. In the end, I'm like, okay, if it's not out there, how many people are going to know if it's right or wrong? I mean, I contacted people. Did the whole, dregs of the internet, pages and pages to try and find it.
I've got friends who are in India where this word comes from, so I was asking them, and they're like, well, I've never seen that before.
Right. So, I found videos on YouTube about these bridges, and they were saying everything in English until they got to like the name of these bridges, and then they just wouldn't say it. They said that the name of the bridges in English, but I wanted it, in Indian. So it was,
Yeah, you'll have to listen to the book to have that treat to find out how they're pronounced. But I don't like it. Yeah, and it's great. It's great actually that Pegasus believed in the project as well. You know, I sent the book to several publishers, but as soon as I went to their website and they said they were looking for books which stretched and flexed the imagination and were kind of spiritually. If not, they just know. Yeah, exactly. You know, they believed in the book as well, so I'm really grateful about that.
Wonderful.
And I stopped saying it to anyone else after I'd been to their website. I was like, yep,
this is it. This is it. It's like when you know. It's just like when I read the audition, I was like, this is it. I have to narrate this book. You know, you just know.
Exactly, which brings us back to the start. When I heard your voice reading it and I had that same kind of whoosh of excitement, I was like, wow, you know,
all the pieces fit together.
And those words have come to life, and like you say, they were written to be read. And here they are just jumping off the page. And I had the delight, actually, when you sent me the whole completed thing, I was kind of walking around my house, sort of pinching myself because I had it on my headphones and I was listening to the book and I was thinking, is this real? It was wonderful.
This is what you wrote.
Yeah, it's like I was grinning from ear to ear. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
How about you? I guess you've got lots of projects coming up now and next.
Yeah, a few more books lined up, and some other projects in the works. So keeping busy. Yeah, keeping busy. There's the Audio Publishers Association conference coming up in May in New York. So that's always fun to go up there and connect with other audiobook narrators and publishers. And yeah, so some good things coming up.
Yeah, and hopefully I can keep you on speed dial for when I finish my next book.
Absolutely, please do.
So this is all quite new to me, my first audiobook, but I know that it's obviously your expertise. So tell me how it works. If somebody wanted to download The Sound of Your Soul, what would they do?
Go to Amazon. You can go to amazon.com or amazon.co.uk, or Audible. Again, available both in the US and the UK. So very easy.
Yeah. We were saying actually before, weren't we, that hopefully it would be a good one for book clubs to kind of get their to, because it does raise so many different questions. I'm going to sit down and actually think of some of those questions and put them online, because I think in terms of discussion, it's very relevant to what's going on right now, like zeitgeist, if you like, with the climate change, with the what do we eat issue, do we all go vegan issue, and you know, how are we ruled, how are we governed? I mean, we've had Brexit in this country, so there's lots of questions being raised there, and then the monarchy are never far away from the headlines, and that's another strand that's woven through the book. So there's lots there, isn't there, to discuss?
Yeah, so many discussion points. Yeah, like you said, with the climate change, with government, spirituality, there's so many great talking points. I think this would be a really good one for a book club.
Yeah, a good one to have a chat over a good cup of tea, a glass of wine, or something like that.
Yeah, tea and cake.
Tea and cake, a very British tea and cake. I'll have to get some sent out to you over there as a thank you.
I love my tea and cake.
Yeah. We'll give you a slice and a virtual cup of tea to say thanks.
Yeah. Lovely. This has been so nice. This has been so lovely to meet you, and hopefully meet you in person at some point when we're both in the same country.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do have the USA and Canada and that whole continent on my radar. So at some point, I'm sure me and my husband will be jetting over there and just, you know, doing as much of it as we can. So we'll take you in en route. How about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be really good. And meantime, thank you. Like, it's been such a blessing to meet you, and it's just been so wonderful to like hear those those words come alive with your voice. And it reminds me of what the ancient Egyptians used to say. They really thought that words were magical and they had power when they were said out loud. And that's the feeling I got when I heard your audiobook of The Sound of Your Soul.
Well, thank you. It really was such a pleasure and an honor to be able to just bring this particular book to life with audio. Yeah, like you said, words matter.
Couldn't put it better myself.